It's your turn to clean after Thanksgiving, Eva. We did all the cooking. My mother's voice hit me before I could even set down my suitcase. I stood in the doorway of my own home, still wearing my work blazer from the red-eye flight back from Seattle, and stared at the disaster zone that used to be my kitchen. Grease splattered across the backsplash. Dirty pans stacked in the sink like a game of Jenga gone wrong. Food crusted onto my grandmother's china plates that I kept for special occasions. The smell of stale turkey and something burnt hung in the air like an accusation. My name is Eva. I am 31 years old, and I own a 3-bedroom townhouse in Columbus, Ohio, that I purchased 4 years ago after working myself half to death as a logistics coordinator for a major shipping company. I bought this place with my own savings, my own credit, and my own sweat equity from years of overtime shifts and missed vacations. And right now, standing in the aftermath of what looked like a hurricane had swept through my kitchen, I felt a level of disrespect I could no longer ignore. "Mom, what happened here?" I asked, my voice surprisingly calm despite the rage building in my chest. My mother, Denise, waved her hand dismissively from her comfortable position on my couch. She had her feet up on my coffee table, shoes still on, watching some reality show on my television. "We had Thanksgiving here while you were gone. Your sister thought it would be nice to use your space since your place is bigger than hers." I blinked. "You had Thanksgiving here, without asking me." "Oh, don't be dramatic," my sister Kendra called from somewhere deeper in the house. I heard her footsteps coming down the hallway, and she appeared wearing what I recognized as one of my bathrobes. "You were gone anyway. What were you going to do? Let the house sit empty?" Yes, that was exactly what I was going to do, because it was my house. I walked slowly into the kitchen, taking in the full scope of the destruction. My refrigerator door hung open, revealing empty shelves where I had left groceries before my trip. The food I had purchased for myself was gone, consumed, used without permission in a celebration I was not invited to attend. "Who was here?" I asked, opening a cabinet to find it similarly ransacked. "Just family," my mom said. "Your Aunt Patricia, Uncle Jerome, the cousins, Kendra's boyfriend Derek. Maybe 30 people total. 30 people. In my home, eating my food, using my dishes, and no one thought to ask me." I turned to look at my mother, really look at her, and saw what I had been refusing to see for years. The entitlement written across her face. The complete lack of awareness that she had done anything wrong. To her, my home was simply an extension of family property, available whenever she deemed it necessary. "When did you get a key?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I copied yours last Christmas," Kendra said with a shrug, tightening the belt on my robe, "in case of emergencies." This was not an emergency. This was an invasion. I thought about the business trip I had just returned from. 3 days in Seattle negotiating contracts, sleeping in budget hotels, eating airport food because the company's travel allowance was pathetic. I had worked through Thanksgiving Day itself, sitting alone in a conference room reviewing shipping manifests while my colleagues went home to their families. I had comforted myself with the thought that at least my house would be peaceful when I returned. Quiet. Clean. Instead, I came home to chaos, and 2 women who saw absolutely nothing wrong with what they had done. "The least you can do is help clean up," my mother continued, still not moving from the couch. "We did all the hard work of organizing and cooking. Cleaning is your contribution." My contribution. To a party I did not host, did not attend, and did not consent to happening in my own home. I set my suitcase down carefully, very carefully, because if I did not control my movements, I was going to start throwing things. I walked past the kitchen into my living room, noting the stains on my carpet, the ring marks on my wooden end tables from drinks placed without coasters. I saw the pillow from my bedroom tossed carelessly on the floor, a blanket I did not recognize draped over my armchair. "Are you staying here?" I asked, the words coming out flat. "Just for a few days. Kendra said. My apartment is being fumigated. Didn't I tell you? She had not told me. She had not told me because she knew I would have said no, and Kendra had never been good at hearing that word. I looked at my mother, who had finally turned her attention from the television to study my face. Something flickered in her expression, perhaps a recognition that I was not responding the way she expected. Usually by now I would have sighed, accepted my fate, and started scrubbing. That was the role I had played in this family for as long as I could remember. But something had shifted during that lonely Thanksgiving in Seattle. Something had cracked. I need to take a shower, I said quietly. Then we're going to talk about this. I walked past them both, feeling their eyes on my back, and closed my bedroom door behind me. Standing under the hot water, I let myself think about all the years they had treated my home as their free event venue. The pattern was so clear now, illuminated by the harsh light of this latest violation. It had started small, as these things always do. When I first bought the townhouse, my family celebrated with me. My mother brought over a casserole. Kendra helped me unpack boxes, and for one brief moment, I felt like we were a normal family capable of normal interactions. But that moment passed quickly, replaced by something else entirely. The first request came a month after I moved in. Kendra needed a place to host her birthday party because her apartment was too small. Could she please use my place? Just this once? I said yes, because that is what sisters do. She promised to clean up afterward. She did not clean up afterward. Then my mother decided my house was the perfect location for Easter dinner. My kitchen was bigger, she explained. My dining room could seat more people. And besides, did I not want to contribute to family gatherings? I said yes, because that is what daughters do. I spent $300 on groceries, cooked a ham from scratch, and cleaned for 2 days afterward, while my mother and sister lounged in my living room recovering from the meal I had prepared. The pattern repeated every holiday, every family milestone, every occasion that required space and effort. Kendra's engagement party, my cousin's baby shower, my aunt's 60th birthday celebration. Each time, my home was volunteered without my permission, and each time I was expected to provide the labor that made the event possible. And through it all, Kendra took credit for bringing everyone together. I remember standing in my kitchen during last year's Christmas dinner, hands raw from washing dishes, listening to my aunt praise Kendra for being such a wonderful hostess. Kendra had smiled graciously and accepted the compliment without correction. She had not mentioned that she had arrived 30 minutes before the guests, contributed a store-bought pie, and spent the entire evening in the living room while I shuttled food from kitchen to table and back again. I had said nothing. I never said anything. My mother's voice echoed in my memory from a conversation we had years ago, when I first started expressing discomfort with these arrangements. Family helps family, Eva. You have this nice big house and no children. The least you can do is share it with people who need the space. The implication was clear. My success was an accident, undeserved, and therefore subject to redistribution according to my family's needs. The fact that I had worked 70-hour weeks for years, sacrificed relationships and personal time, and carefully saved every penny meant nothing compared to the simple fact that I had something they wanted. I turned off the shower and stood dripping on the bath mat, staring at my reflection in the foggy mirror. The woman looking back at me was tired. Not just physically tired from the flight, but tired in her bones, tired of being used, tired of being taken for granted. I thought about my father, who had passed away when I was 19. He had been the buffer in our family, the one who recognized that my mother and sister operated by different rules than the rest of the world. He had protected me when he could, encouraged my independence, and told me repeatedly that I did not owe anyone my peace. "You're allowed to say no," he had told me once, during a rare moment of privacy. "Don't let them convince you otherwise." But after he died, saying no became impossible. My mother weaponized her grief, and Kendra took advantage of the chaos. I became the responsible one, the stable one, the one who could always be counted on to pick up the pieces. And somewhere along the way, I forgot that I was allowed to have boundaries of my own. I dried off and got dressed, choosing comfortable clothes because I suspected this conversation was going to be long and unpleasant. When I emerged from my bedroom, I found my mother exactly where I had left her, and Kendra had made herself at home in my kitchen, eating cereal from one of my bowls. "Feel better?" my mother asked without looking up. I did not feel better. I felt like a stranger in my own home, which I supposed was the point. "We need to talk about what happened here," I said, keeping my voice level. Kendra rolled her eyes. "Here we go." "You used my house without permission," I continued. "You ate my food, used my dishes, made a mess, and now you're telling me it's my responsibility to clean up after a party I didn't attend." "It's family," my mother said, as if those two words explained everything. "Family shares." "Family asks," I corrected. "Family respects boundaries. Family doesn't copy keys and throw parties in someone else's home while they're out of town." Kendra set down her spoon with a clatter. "You're always so dramatic, Eva. It was Thanksgiving. You weren't even here. What's the big deal?" The big deal was that they had violated my trust, my space, and my peace of mind without a second thought. The big deal was that they saw nothing wrong with their behavior and would do it again the first chance they got. The big deal was that I had spent my entire adult life accommodating their demands, and I was finally starting to see the shape of my own resentment. But I did not say any of that. Not yet. Instead, I walked into the kitchen, grabbed a trash bag from under the sink, and started cleaning. Some battles require preparation. My sister watched me clean with an expression of smug satisfaction that made my skin crawl. She sat at my kitchen island, scrolling through her phone, occasionally making comments about how I was loading the dishwasher wrong or missing a spot on the counter. She did not offer to help. The thought clearly never crossed her mind. "You know," Kendra said, not looking up from her phone, "you should really be grateful we thought of you. We could have gone to Aunt Patricia's place, but we wanted to include you in spirit." Include me in spirit. By using my home without permission, eating my food, and leaving me with the aftermath. That was their idea of inclusion. I scrubbed at a stubborn stain on my stovetop, applying more pressure than necessary. "How generous of you." See, that's exactly what I'm talking about," Kendra continued, finally putting down her phone to give me her full attention. "That attitude. You always act like you're better than everyone because you have this house and your fancy job. But at the end of the day, we're family. This is what family does." I had heard this argument so many times that it had lost all meaning. Family. The word had become a weapon in their hands, deployed whenever I pushed back against their expectations, as if sharing blood gave them automatic access to everything I had worked to build. My mother wandered into the kitchen, drawn by the sound of our conversation. She leaned against the doorframe with her arms crossed, looking at me with the particular disappointment she reserved for moments when I failed to perform gratitude on cue. "Your sister has a point," she said. "You've always been selfish, Ava. Even as a child. You never wanted to share your toys, your room, anything. Some things never change." The revisionist history was breathtaking. I had shared everything as a child, because I had no choice. Kendra was the baby, the favorite, and whatever she wanted, she received. My toys became her toys. My clothes were handed down to her the moment she expressed interest. My room was converted into a nursery when she was born, and I was moved to a closet-sized space at the end of the hall. But pointing out these facts was useless. They had constructed their own narrative, one in which I was the villain, and they were the reasonable, long-suffering family members dealing with my difficult personality. "I'm not being selfish," I said carefully, scraping dried gravy off a serving platter. "I'm asking for basic respect. You used my home without asking. You could have called me, texted me, anything. But you didn't, because you knew I might say no. Would you have said no? My mother asked, and there was something in her voice that suggested she already knew the answer. I paused, considering the question honestly. A year ago, I would have said yes through gritted teeth, resentful but compliant. 6 months ago, I might have found an excuse, some conflict that made hosting impossible. But now? Yes, I said quietly. I would have said no. Because I was alone in a hotel room eating a sandwich from a vending machine while you were here, in my house, celebrating without me. Something flickered across my mother's face, quickly suppressed. For a moment, I thought I saw guilt. But then her expression hardened, and I realized I had made a tactical error. I had shown vulnerability, and in my family, vulnerability was weakness to be exploited. See, that's the problem, Kendra said, standing up from the island. You're jealous. You're always jealous of the bond Mom and I have. You choose to isolate yourself with your job and your empty house, and then you get upset when we have fun without you. The accusation was so absurd, so perfectly backward, that I almost laughed. Almost. But laughter required energy I did not have. I'm not jealous, I said, turning back to the dishes. I'm tired. I'm tired of being expected to provide resources and labor while receiving nothing in return. I'm tired of being the venue for parties I'm not invited to attend. And I'm tired of having the same conversation over and over again. Then stop having it, Kendra said with a shrug. Accept that this is how things work and move on. It's not that hard. She walked past me toward the living room, and as she did, she smirked. It was a small expression, barely noticeable, but I caught it. That smirk contained everything I needed to know about how my sister viewed our relationship. I was a resource, a convenience, a person whose boundaries existed only as obstacles to be overcome. We're not leaving, by the way, she added over her shoulder. My apartment won't be ready until Monday, so you'll have to deal with us for a few more days. I stood frozen in the kitchen, dirty platter still in my hands, processing her words. She had not asked if she could stay. She had informed me of her intention to occupy my home, as though it were a foregone conclusion, and my mother, still leaning in the doorway, nodded in agreement. It's the least you can do, my mother said. After the fit you're throwing about one little party. Honestly, Eva, I raised you better than this. She had not raised me at all, really. After my father died, I had raised myself, working 2 jobs through college while she spent his life insurance money on lottery tickets and home shopping network purchases. But that was another fact destined to be ignored, another piece of reality that did not fit their preferred narrative. I set down the platter and looked at them both. My mother, comfortable in her entitlement. My sister, confident in her ability to walk all over me. They genuinely believed they had the right to occupy and destroy my space whenever they wanted. The realization settled into my bones like ice water. I had spent years hoping they would change, would recognize my contributions, would treat me with basic decency. But standing in my destroyed kitchen, looking at 2 people who saw nothing wrong with their behavior, I finally understood. They would never change. The only thing I could change was myself. I'm going to finish cleaning, I said quietly. We'll talk more later. I turned back to the sink, and they retreated to the living room, satisfied that they had won another round in our endless war. They had no idea that I was already planning my next move. The next morning, I tried a different approach. I woke early, before my mother and sister stirred, and assessed the remaining damage to my home with fresh eyes. The kitchen was mostly clean now, thanks to 3 hours of scrubbing the night before, but the living room still bore the evidence of their celebration. Stains on the carpet, scratches on my coffee table, a mysterious sticky substance on my television remote that I decided not to investigate too closely. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen island, thinking about how to handle the situation. Perhaps I had overreacted the day before. Perhaps if I approached them calmly, reasonably, They would understand my perspective and agree to help restore my home to its previous condition. Perhaps family could still mean something other than obligation and exploitation. When Kendra wandered into the kitchen around 10, still wearing my bathrobe, I was ready with my carefully prepared speech. "Good morning," I said, keeping my voice pleasant. "I was thinking we could tackle the living room together today. If we all pitch in, it shouldn't take more than a couple hours." Kendra blinked at me, reaching for the coffee pot. "Pitch in? For what?" "The cleaning," I said patiently. "There's still a lot of work to do from the party." She poured herself a cup of coffee, added sugar from my container, and took a long sip before responding. "That's really not my thing, Eva. I'm more of a delegator than a doer." "But it was your party," I pointed out. "You organized it. You invited people to my home. Don't you think you should help clean up the mess?" Kendra set down her mug with a dramatic sigh. "Here we go again. Look, I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this. You weren't using the house. We put it to good use. End of story." My mother appeared in the kitchen doorway, attracted by the sound of our voices. She was fully dressed, which surprised me until I noticed her purse on her shoulder. "We're going to brunch," she announced. "That nice place on 5th Street. You can drop us off on your way to the grocery store." I stared at her. "Drop you off? Grocery store?" "Well, yes. There's nothing to eat here. You'll need to restock if we're staying through the weekend." The audacity was stunning. They had eaten everything in my refrigerator, made no offer to replace it, and now expected me to chauffeur them to brunch before spending my own money to feed them for the next several days. "I'm not going to the grocery store," I said slowly. "And I'm not dropping you anywhere. You have legs. You can walk." My mother's expression shifted from expectation to irritation. "Don't be difficult, Eva. The restaurant is 20 minutes away. Then call a ride share. You have phones." Kendra rolled her eyes so hard I was surprised they did not get stuck. "God, you're being so ungrateful. We chose to spend our holiday here, in your house, because we wanted to include you. And this is how you thank us?" "Include me?" I repeated, my voice rising despite my intention to stay calm. "You threw a party in my house while I was 1,000 miles away working. How exactly is that including me?" "You could have been here," Kendra shot back. "You chose your job over family, as usual." "I didn't choose anything. I had a mandatory business trip. I didn't have a say in the timing." "There's always a choice," my mother interjected. "You could have told them no, but your job is more important to you than your family. It always has been." The circular logic was dizzying. They were blaming me for not attending a party I did not know was happening, in my own home, that they had organized without my knowledge or consent. And somehow, in their minds, this made me the villain. "Let me get this straight," I said, gripping the edge of the counter to ground myself. "You're upset with me for not being at a party you didn't tell me about, in my house, that you didn't ask permission to throw. And because I wasn't there, it's now my responsibility to clean up the mess and buy groceries to feed you for the rest of the weekend." "That's a very negative way to look at it," my mother said. "But essentially, yes. Hosting is your responsibility since you have the resources. You make more money than your sister. You have this big house. The least you can do is share." There it was again. The least I could do. As if everything I had ever done for them counted for nothing. As if my years of labor, my countless sacrifices, my endless accommodation of their demands were invisible. The least I could do was always more than I had already given. "I'm not going to the grocery store," I repeated. "And I'm not cleaning the living room by myself. If you want to eat this weekend, you can order delivery or buy your own food. If you want to watch television without sticky residue on the remote, you can clean it yourself." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut glass. My mother and Kendra exchanged a look. The kind of look that contained entire conversations, built on years of shared assumptions about who I was and how far I could be pushed. "Fine," Kendra said finally, her voice dripping with condescension. "If you're going to be like that, we'll figure it out ourselves. But don't expect us to thank you for your hospitality. Because frankly, Eva, you don't know the meaning of the word." She swept out of the kitchen, my bathrobe trailing behind her like a cape. My mother followed, pausing just long enough to give me a look of pure disappointment. "Your father would be ashamed of how you're acting," she said quietly. "He raised you better than this." The mention of my father hit like a physical blow. She knew exactly what she was doing, invoking his memory to manipulate my emotions. And for a moment, it worked. I felt the familiar guilt rising in my chest, the automatic impulse to apologize and accommodate. But then I remembered what he had actually said to me, in those private moments when he saw clearly what my mother and sister were doing. "You're allowed to say no." I said nothing as she walked away, but something inside me had shifted, hardened into something that felt almost like resolve. The rest of the day passed in tense silence. My mother and sister eventually called a rideshare and went to brunch without me, returning several hours later with shopping bags full of clothes from stores at the mall. Apparently they had found money for shopping, just not for groceries or any contribution to my household. I spent the afternoon in my bedroom, door closed, trying to catch up on work emails and avoid further confrontation. But the walls of my townhouse were not thick, and I could hear them in the living room, laughing and talking as if they owned the place, as if I were the intruder in my own home. Around 6, I emerged to find them sprawled across my furniture, watching a movie on my television, surrounded by takeout containers from the Thai restaurant down the street. They had ordered enough food to feed 4 people, and had not thought to ask if I wanted anything. "There's leftover pad thai if you're hungry," Kendra offered, gesturing vaguely at a container on the coffee table, though it might be cold by now. I was hungry. I had not eaten all day, too stressed and anxious to think about food, but accepting their scraps felt like submission, and I was done submitting. "I'm fine," I said, heading to the kitchen to scrounge together something from whatever they had not consumed. As I stood at my nearly empty refrigerator, contemplating a sad meal of condiments and questionable leftovers, I heard my mother's voice drifting in from the living room. She was talking to Kendra, presumably assuming I could not hear. "She'll get over it," my mother said. "She always does. Remember the Easter incident? She was upset for a week, but then she came around. The Easter incident. That was what they called the time Kendra had invited 20 people to my house for Easter brunch without asking, eaten all the food I had prepared for myself, and left me to clean up while she went to a spa day. I had been furious, but my mother had worn me down with guilt and emotional manipulation until I apologized for making a scene. "She's more stubborn this time," Kendra observed. "But you're right. We'll just stay the weekend like we planned. She won't do anything about it. She never does." The words hit me like ice water. She won't do anything about it. She never does. They were right. For years I had complained and protested and expressed my unhappiness, but in the end, I always capitulated. I always let them have what they wanted because the alternative seemed too costly. The guilt, the accusations of selfishness, the weaponized tears and emotional manipulation. It was easier to give in than to fight. But standing in my empty kitchen, listening to them discuss my predictable surrender as if it were a foregone conclusion, something inside me finally snapped. I thought about all the holidays I had hosted, all the money I had spent, all the hours I had worked to clean and prepare and serve while they enjoyed the fruits of my labor. I thought about the graduation party they had thrown for Kendra in my backyard without asking, the bridal shower for my cousin that had damaged my hardwood floors, the countless dinners and gatherings that had left me exhausted and depleted while they praised each other for being such wonderful hostesses. I thought about my father and what he would say if he could see me now. Would he be ashamed, as my mother claimed? Or would he be sad, watching his daughter be used and disrespected by the family he had trusted to take care of her? I knew the answer, and it gave me the clarity I needed. "We'll just stay the weekend," my mother continued, her voice carrying clearly through the thin walls. "Let her pout. By Monday, she'll be back to normal, and we can start planning the Christmas gathering. Her house really is perfect for it." Christmas. They were already planning to do this again at Christmas, treating my home as their personal event space, assuming I would fall in line like I always did. I closed the refrigerator door quietly and stood in the darkened kitchen, thinking. For the first time in years, I was not thinking about how to accommodate their demands or minimize their displeasure. I was thinking about how to protect myself. My lease was in my name alone. The mortgage was in my name alone. Every bill, every utility, every piece of furniture had been purchased with my money and my effort. They had no legal claim to anything in this house, no right to be here beyond my willingness to allow it, and I was no longer willing. I walked back to my bedroom, moving quietly past the living room where they sat engrossed in their movie, oblivious to the shift that had just occurred. I closed my door and sat on my bed, pulling out my phone. I had a lot to do before morning. The next day was Saturday. I woke before dawn, moving through my morning routine with mechanical precision. Shower, dress, coffee. I kept my movements quiet, not wanting to alert my mother and sister to the fact that I was awake. They had stayed up late the night before, talking and laughing in my living room until well past midnight. I had heard them through my bedroom wall, discussing people I did not know, events I had not attended, a life that had continued without me while I worked to pay for the house they were enjoying. Around 7, I heard Kendra's alarm go off, followed by mumbled complaints and the sound of her getting up to use the bathroom. My mother was still asleep, her snores audible from the guest room she had claimed as her own. "We're going out for breakfast," Kendra announced when she emerged, dressed in clothes she had apparently borrowed from my closet. "That diner on Maple Street, Mom's craving pancakes." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Sounds nice." "You can come if you want," she added, though her tone suggested she hoped I would decline. "But you'll have to drive. Neither of us know how to get there." "I have some work to catch up on," I said. "You can use the GPS on your phone." Kendra shrugged, unsurprised. "Suit yourself. We'll probably be gone a couple hours. Try not to mope the whole time we're out." I watched her wake our mother, listened to them get ready, heard them call another rideshare since neither of them had a car. When the door finally closed behind them, I waited exactly 3 minutes to make sure they were truly gone. Then I got to work. The first call was to a locksmith. I explained that I needed the locks changed on my front and back doors, that it was urgent, and that I would pay extra for same-day service. The locksmith, a practical woman named Georgia, said she could be there within the hour. The second call was to my neighbor, Bradley, who I knew had been away visiting family and had just returned. I asked if I could leave some boxes on his porch for a few hours, explaining that I was dealing with a family situation and needed temporary storage. Bradley, who had witnessed enough of my family's behavior during previous visits, agreed without asking questions. While I waited for the locksmith, I packed. I went through the guest room first, gathering my mother's clothes, toiletries, and personal items into the suitcase she had brought. I did the same with Kendra's things, which were scattered across my living room, my bathroom, and inexplicably, my home office. I found items I had not realized they had taken. A cashmere sweater I had been missing for months, a pair of earrings that had belonged to my grandmother, a charging cable I had searched for everywhere. I packed it all. Every item that did not belong to me went into boxes and bags, which I carried across the street to Bradley's porch. He helped me with the heavier items, asking only once if I was sure about what I was doing. "I'm sure," I told him. "It's time." Georgia the locksmith arrived at exactly 9:15, professional and efficient. She changed both locks in under an hour, handed me the new keys, and wished me luck with whatever was going on. I paid her in cash and thanked her for the quick work. With the locks changed and their belongings removed, I had one more task to complete. I sat at my kitchen table with a pen and paper, composing a note that I would tape to my front door. The words came more easily than I expected. Your belongings are across the street at Bradley's. The locks have been changed. Find your own host next year. Do not contact me. I read it over several times, making sure it said exactly what I meant. Clear, direct, final. No room for negotiation or manipulation. I taped the note to the door, making sure it was visible at eye level. Then I gathered my purse, my phone, and a book I had been meaning to read, and I left my house. There was a cafe 3 blocks away, a quiet place with good coffee and comfortable seating. I had been meaning to spend more time there, to build a life outside of work and family obligations. Today seemed like the perfect day to start. I walked there slowly, breathing in the cold November air, feeling lighter than I had in years. Behind me, my house sat waiting, locks changed, belongings boxed. A note on the door that would shatter the assumptions my mother and sister had held for so long. They would return from breakfast expecting to relax in my living room, watch my television, use my things. Instead, they would find a locked door and a message that could not be misinterpreted. I ordered a large coffee and settled into a corner booth, pulling out my phone to check the security app I had installed months ago. It showed a live feed from the camera on my front porch, currently displaying nothing but an empty doorstep and a fluttering note. I opened my book and began to read, glancing at the security feed every few minutes, waiting. They had said I would not do anything about it. They had said I never did. They were wrong. Around 11:30, a notification buzzed on my phone. Motion detected at front door. I set down my book and watched the screen as 2 familiar figures appeared on the feed, climbing the steps to my porch with the casual confidence of people who expected to be welcomed. I watched Kendra reach for the door handle. I watched her try it once, twice, 3 times. I watched her turn to look at the note I had left, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. And then I watched her start to scream. From my comfortable seat in the cafe, I had a front row view of the chaos unfolding on my security feed. Kendra was pounding on the door now, her fists making dull thuds against the wood that I could almost hear through the screen. My mother stood behind her, reading the note over and over as if the words might change if she stared at them long enough. My phone began to ring. Kendra's name flashed across the screen, the first of what I suspected would be many calls. I declined it and returned my attention to the security footage. I watched them try the back door, which was equally locked with its new hardware. I watched Kendra attempt to peer through the windows, shading her eyes against the glass, searching for something that would explain why the world had suddenly stopped bending to her will. My phone rang again. This time it was my mother. I declined that call too. They huddled on the porch, having what appeared to be an intense discussion. I could not hear the words, but I could read their body language well enough. Kendra was angry, her arms waving in dramatic gestures. My mother was trying to call me again, her phone pressed to her ear, her expression oscillating between disbelief and fury. A text message arrived, then another, then a flurry of them, piling up faster than I could read. "Ava, what the hell is going on? This isn't funny, open the door. Your mother is very upset with you. We're standing outside like idiots, call me back now." I read each message without responding, feeling a calm I had not expected. The anxiety I had anticipated, the guilt that usually accompanied any act of defiance against my family, was conspicuously absent. In its place was something that felt almost like peace. On the security feed, Kendra was now on the phone with someone else, probably trying to find a locksmith of her own, I thought. But I had chosen Georgia specifically because she was the only locksmith in the area who could do same-day service, and she had told me her next opening was not until Tuesday. My mother sat down heavily on my porch steps, her face in her hands. For a moment, I felt a twinge of something that might have been sympathy. But then I remembered her words from the night before. She won't do anything about it. She never does. They had counted on my passivity. They had built their entire approach to our relationship on the assumption that I would always back down, always accommodate, always put their needs above my own comfort and dignity. And I had reinforced that assumption, year after year, capitulation after capitulation. No more. I ordered another coffee and a sandwich, settling in for what I expected would be a long afternoon. The security notifications continued to arrive, documenting their increasingly desperate attempts to gain entry to my home. At one point, Kendra tried climbing over the back fence, but my neighbor's dog began barking so aggressively that she retreated. Around 1 p.m, they finally figured out where their belongings were. I watched them cross the street to Bradley's house, watched them knock on his door, watched him point them toward the boxes piled on his porch. Kendra's reaction was visceral, her hands flying to her head in disbelief. My mother simply stared at the bags and suitcases, her mouth moving in words I could not hear. Bradley, bless him, kept the interaction brief. He handed over the belongings, said something that made both women flinch, and closed his door firmly. I made a mental note to bring him a thank you gift later. They stood on the sidewalk with their things, looking lost. This was not how the weekend was supposed to go. They were supposed to be lounging in my living room, eating food I had purchased, making plans for future parties in my space. Instead, they were homeless, their free accommodations revoked without warning. My phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed a number I did not recognize. I answered, curious. Eva? A man's voice, confused and slightly annoyed. This is Derek, Kendra's boyfriend. She's really upset. What's going on over there? Nothing that concerns you, I said pleasantly. Tell Kendra she can stay at your place. That's what boyfriends are for. I hung up before he could respond. The calls came in frantic waves over the next several hours. My mother, my sister, my Aunt Patricia, my cousin Jerome, various family members and friends who had apparently been recruited to intervene on their behalf. Each call went unanswered. Each voicemail went unheard. I remained at the cafe until late afternoon, catching up on the reading I had been neglecting, savoring the quiet and the solitude. When I finally returned home, the porch was empty, the note still taped to the door, slightly crumpled from handling. I removed the note, unlocked my new door with my new key, and stepped into my house. The silence that greeted me was profound and beautiful. No voices demanding my attention. No bodies sprawled across my furniture. No evidence of unwanted guests except the faint smell of their perfume, which I immediately addressed by opening every window. My phone buzzed with a new text from my mother. This is the cruelest thing you've ever done. Your father would be heartbroken. I typed back a single response, the first communication I had sent since leaving that morning. Dad told me I was allowed to say no. This is me saying no. Then I blocked her number. The next text came from Kendra, increasingly hysterical as the reality of her situation became clear. You can't do this. We're family. Where are we supposed to stay? Mom is crying. This is your fault. Answer me, Ava. I know you can see these. I blocked her number too. By evening, I had blocked every family member who had attempted to contact me, a list that included people I had not spoken to in years, but who had apparently been activated by my mother's call to arms. The silence that followed was golden. I made myself dinner, a simple meal of pasta and vegetables that I ate at my own kitchen table, in my own clean kitchen. I watched television in my own living room, on my own couch, without anyone commenting on my choice of program. I took a long bath in my own bathroom, using products that had not been touched by uninvited hands. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt at home in my own home. The next morning, Sunday, brought a new development. A letter had been slipped under my door sometime during the night, hand-delivered by someone who had not been deterred by the late hour. I recognized my mother's handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a long, rambling letter that alternated between guilt trips and accusations, I had destroyed the family. I had abandoned my responsibilities. I had broken my mother's heart and ruined Thanksgiving forever. There were references to everything she had sacrificed to raise me, conveniently omitting the fact that my father had been the primary caregiver and breadwinner until his death. At the bottom, almost as an afterthought, was a single question. Where are we supposed to go for Christmas? I read the letter twice, then fed it through my paper shredder. The answer to her question was simple, though she would not like it. She could go anywhere she wanted, as long as it was not my house. Those days were over. The rest of the weekend passed peacefully. I cleaned the remaining traces of their occupation from my home, scrubbing floors and washing linens until every surface sparkled. I rearranged furniture, reclaiming spaces they had colonized. I changed the passwords on my streaming services and made an appointment to get my spare key back from the neighbor who had agreed to hold it for emergencies. Monday morning, I returned to work with a clarity I had not felt in years. My colleagues noticed the difference, commenting on how relaxed I seemed, how confident. I accepted their observations without explanation, knowing that some transformations are too personal to share. The weeks that followed were not without challenges. My extended family, fed a distorted version of events by my mother and sister, attempted various interventions. There were phone calls from aunts demanding explanations, emails from cousins expressing disappointment, and one memorable voicemail from my Uncle Jerome, calling me names that I would not repeat in polite company. I addressed each communication with the same response, a brief, factual account of what had happened, followed by a clear statement of my boundaries. Those who accepted my explanation were welcomed to maintain contact. Those who did not were blocked along with the others. The family tree thinned considerably, but what remained was healthier than what I had pruned away. Christmas came and went. I spent it alone, by choice, in my clean and peaceful home. I cooked myself a small meal, watched holiday movies, and went to bed early. The silence was not lonely. It was liberating. Kendra, I heard through the remaining family grapevine, had bounced between friends' couches and Derek's apartment before eventually finding a sublet she could afford. The relationship with Derek did not survive the stress of her sudden homelessness, and she was reportedly single again by the new year. My mother had fared slightly better, moving in with her sister Patricia for what was supposed to be a temporary arrangement. But temporary had stretched into permanent, and Patricia's patience was wearing thin. There were rumors of arguments, of resentments building, of a household on the verge of fracturing. These developments reached me secondhand, through casual mentions from the few family members who still spoke to both sides. I listened without comment, without satisfaction, but also without guilt. Their consequences were their own, the natural result of choices they had made, and attitudes they had cultivated over years of entitlement and disrespect. As for me, I thrived. Without the constant drain of family obligations and the emotional labor of managing their expectations, I found energy I had not known I possessed. I received a promotion at work, recognition for contributions that had previously gone overlooked while I was distracted by family drama. I started exercising regularly, joined a book club, made friends who valued my company rather than my resources. I even began dating again, something I had avoided for years because I never had the time or emotional bandwidth. The man I met was kind and respectful, interested in who I was rather than what I could provide. He asked before borrowing things and cleaned up after himself without being prompted. These basic courtesies, which should have been unremarkable, felt revolutionary after a lifetime of family members who believed everything I had was communal property. The final confrontation came 6 months later, at a funeral for a distant relative I barely remembered. My mother approached me during the reception, her face older and more tired than the last time I had seen her. "I hope you're satisfied," she said quietly. "You've destroyed this family." I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but peace. "The family was already destroyed," I replied. "I just stopped pretending otherwise." She had no response to that. She turned and walked away, and I let her go. As for the lasting consequences of their choices, Kendra's constant housing instability eventually caught up with her. Her credit score tanked from unpaid bills and broken leases, making it nearly impossible to rent anywhere decent. She was working 2 part-time jobs now, neither of which offered benefits, scrambling to maintain a lifestyle that had once been subsidized by her access to my resources. My mother fared no better. Patricia finally kicked her out after a particularly nasty argument, and she ended up in a small studio apartment on the far side of the city, alone, and without the network of family members she had once taken for granted. They had burned those bridges too, one by one, as people realized that their pattern of exploitation was not limited to me. The holiday gatherings they used to dominate had simply stopped happening. The family scattered by years of accumulated resentments that had nothing to do with my actions, and everything to do with theirs. Standing in my living room on the anniversary of that terrible Thanksgiving, I thought about everything that had changed in a single year. I had lost my mother and sister, at least in any meaningful sense. But I had gained something far more valuable: myself. The woman I had been before, the one who accepted mistreatment because she did not believe she deserved better, was gone. In her place stood someone who understood that family was not an obligation to be exploited, but a relationship to be earned. And I had learned, finally, that setting boundaries was not cruelty. It was survival. Looking back on my journey from doormat to defender of my own peace, I realized that the hardest part had not been changing the locks or writing the note or blocking the numbers. The hardest part had been believing I was worth protecting in the first place.